they all priced the book at less than $20, like $19.99. So what's the deal? Why are they pricing it below what I promised you was the holy grail of business? And, oh, we maximize profits. Yep, Russ, I get it. That makes perfect logical sense. And that means we should price it at $34.99. But yet in the real world, we find out they price it at $19.99. Are they bad at math? Do they not know economics? What do you think these big bookstores are doing? Okay, trying to get them in the store. Why would they want to do that? They'll buy more things, other things, right? So this is a concept that multi-product businesses will use as a technique. So what we did here was kind of principles of economics in a single product firm. Most firms, again, aren't a single product firm, right? They're selling multiple products. And so now we're going to get a little more sophisticated in this chapter on what they can do to maximize profits. So we have this kind of loss leader concept where maybe if they get in the door, they'll spend some money on some other stuff that we do have a higher profit margin in. And so we at least break even on the Harry Potter book. We bought it for $18.99. We sell it for $19.99. Big deal. We make a buck. Maybe we even just sell it at $18.99. So what they found out was that they estimated 1% of its $2.89 billion second quarter revenue was due to the added sales from customers purchasing Potter. Not too bad of a deal, right? So they definitely are going on, oh, and you know how Amazon works, right? Well, people who like Harry Potter may like, fill in the blank, right? And so they nudge you into other purchases, possibly other purchases that have higher profit margins too. And so they can make up the fact that they're not maybe getting a big hit off that particular book, but they're ended up maximizing profits by bringing other products into the picture. Okay, questions or comments there? All right. Okay, so that's what we already said. So suppose you've got a video store and you've got some rival stores. Would you change the price of video rentals at each one? So you buy out your competitor. So especially a small town like Ottawa, right, or some smaller town in Nowhereville, USA, where they've got like 2 video stores or 2 gas stations or 2 whatever, right? So suppose you buy out the video store. Should you change the price of video rentals in each store, assuming you're the only show in town and you're buying up the other competitor? What do you think you should do? What's that?
Either increase price of one and sales of the other, or since there's no alternative, increase the price of both.
Increase the price of both, right? Yeah, just like a good monopolist here. We control the market now. And if there's not a lot of available substitutes, then we can probably raise our price. We're going to have a more elastic or a less elastic demand. Less elastic, right? So as we start to suck up the number of substitutes, then the demand's going to become more inelastic or less elastic. Right, so we're going to have a steeper demand curve, and so that would allow us to raise our price and not lose much business. Okay, so yeah, we wouldn't want to cannibalize on our profits, so raise the prices at both would be the good thing to do. So demand for a bundle of substitutes is less elastic than the demand for individual products. Less elastic demand implies a higher optimal price. So that's kind of what we're saying here. How we define the good. You remember when I brought you through the gas station example? And we said, what's the demand for gasoline? Well, it's pretty inelastic. Well, what's the demand for price chopper gasoline, right? Their gasoline at their shop. Well, you can just go down the block and get some. So what we're really doing here is by eliminating those substitutes, we're giving a lot more market power. Okay, so this gets a little bit more sophisticated here. So if we have multiple products that aren't identical to each other, we might be able to nudge people into the thing that we make the most money in, right? So now, suppose that one video store has a certain type of product and another store doesn't, or the other store has something different. So what we might be able to do is push people into the place where we have the higher profit margin, right? So we might be able to nudge people, like we're using our own facility. We own both stores, but we might be able to push people one direction or the other into each one. So that's a technique we might be able to pull off when we get a little more sophisticated. Okay, so some other strategies with multiple product firms. So reposition the products so they don't directly compete. Can you give me an example at Walmart or something? You got an example in mind right away?
In the chip aisle, there's like all the Tostitos, salsas, and like quesos and everything like that.
Yeah.
And then if you go down, like it's like way down the aisle on the other side, and it's like all the Walmart brands, salsa, queso.
Right. So they put the generic brands away from the name brand. Yeah, that's a good example. Anybody else come up with something where maybe now that we're kind of looking at this, you're like, oh, that's what they're doing, right? So yeah, that's a good one. I think Tostitos, they have to probably pay a little premium to put their salsa right on that special shelf next to their chips. But they probably find it's worth it. So then we're more impulsive. We're not thinking, oh, I could buy Walmart great value salsa for half the price. And maybe it even tastes better, who knows?
Would that kind of be with the same as how, more bigger name, like cereals, you're going to see Captain Crunch and what's the great one? Frosted Flakes. Like they're going to be more in the middle shelf, whereas you'll see a lot of the cheaper ones are more in the bottom, like, or the bag cereals at the very end.
Yeah, so like with cereals, sometimes have you noticed you'll see the name brand and the generic like right next to each other. And then at other times you'll see the generic, I think what you're saying, like the generic brand might be down the aisle from the name brand, right? And so if you're the store owner, if you're the price chopper, or Walmart's probably as good as an example as anything, if they don't have any special premium that the retail one is paying them, then they want to put them side by side, right? So they're going to nudge you into their product by looking at the price difference. And so by having the high value, Walgreens comes to mind too, where they'll put their Nice brand right next. So you've got the cashews from Planters or whatever, the name brand, and then right next to it is the Nice brand, right? So they have a little more pricing power by the way they position the product on the shelf. They might be able to put more on the Nice brand because you're putting a perspective right next to the name brand, right on the shelf as you're buying. Like you can't help but see that price. Whereas if it's positioned over here, then the consumer might not even buy it. Right? They might not even look like, oh, I need some nuts. Oh yeah, these are good ones. And you grab it and you don't look 10 feet down. So even that type of product positioning is very intentional. And so that's how they can induce, like you brought up the Tostitos salsa. I think that's exactly what they're able to do, is to say, hey, you need to pay us a little premium for product positioning. So all the end cap shelves that have the stuff, those companies are paying for that end cap presence for that inside the retail store too. Okay, any other examples from the comments?
Would this mean like a car dealership having a separate lot for like, used cars and like maybe not the newest model cars and having like their showrooms and like all the ones on display would be like the newest model
keeping a physical distance between the used car lot and the new car lot, so that you don't pull in, you're like, oh, I'm kind of being dumb by paying $20,000 for a new car. Look at this, the used one's only $12,000 for a 3-year-old model. Yeah.
So it's almost like they're almost handled separately. It's like you're looking for a new car or a used car most of the time. They probably just like, oh, you're looking for a used car, like send it that way. And same way.
And everybody's different, right? So if some shoppers will, I'm a used car person, so I'm just going to go to the used car lot anyway. It's like, that's not even possible. So what they're trying to do is for a certain segment of the market, not call it to their attention the price difference between the used car and the new car, right? So there's people that are new car people, like, oh, I gotta buy new, I don't want to deal with problems and maintenance and whatever, I want the warranty. And so they don't want to introduce a possible substitute to them, so they keep it separate. All right. Okay, so for the video store, so one might have depth and the other one a wider range title. So by varying up the stores, they can cater to people's preferences that way too. All right, so how about complements? So the video store purchases a parking lot next door. So common ownership means pricing decisions must consider the effects on movie rentals as well as parking lot. So reducing the price at one increases the demand at others. So this is kind of similar to our quiz question with Budweiser and Marlboro cigarettes. So what do places tend to do, at least in the United States? I'll tell you a story here in a sec. But so if you have the parking, do we usually raise the price of parking in the United States? Do we charge parking? Threaten to tow, keep it protective, so that you want people to know that it's yours. So you're going to have it well marked and stuff too, right? But do we tend to charge for parking in the United States? Yeah, in a big downtown area, of course, yeah, there's going to be parking, and you kind of expect that when you go into it. But I was surprised in South Africa that we went to this kind of regular mall. I mean, the malls are a little bit different there. They never look quite the same. But we go to a mall, and they charge for parking at the mall. And I'm like, well, this would never fly in the United States. You know, we don't want to have to pay for our parking to get there. And furthermore, they didn't have any sort of valet, validation. So if you purchased at the mall, you know, you get parking for free. You've seen that in some places, even in downtown areas, where you can park in the parking ramp, but as long as you bought something there, you show your receipt, and then your parking will be covered. So nothing like that. So a lot of that can be cultural too, on what we've come to expect in the United States, that we're gonna drive our car and we better not have to pay for it. Otherwise, I'm not gonna come to your business. Right?
That's actually how it is
in Malaysia. Is pay for parking?
Yeah, we would go to our malls are more like departmental stores.
Yeah.
So even if you go to a departmental store to get groceries, you have to pay the parking.
They pay the parking. Yeah.
So most of the time, we would just park on the side of the road. One person sits in the car, someone goes
and go runs in, especially if it's something quick. Yeah.
It wasn't like that anymore.
What did they? No charge at all? Yeah. Yeah. So each place is kind of different, so it's kind of fun to see that. But that's knowing your customers, right, and what they're going to want to expect, and should we do the parking or not, and then if so, how many parking spaces for that matter. Okay, so this was something I brought up to the author. So we've got this bundle of goods. We're kind of always thinking about, now I've got multiple products. I'm not just talking about a single book or a single product, but think about the two things together. And for this one, the book said to lower both. So that kind of surprised me on the pricing strategy. So they said decrease the price of the lower margin good. So goods that are used together, if they're complements, if I increase the price, what's going to happen to my sales? They go down for both goods, right? Because they use them together, peanut butter and jelly or whatever. So if the goods are used together, an increase in the price of one is going to cause a reduction. Similarly, a decrease in the price of one is going to cause both to go up. So when I read what they said about lowering both, I found it kind of confusing because I thought, well, wait a second, if we're using them together, why not decrease the price of the lower margin good? So the one with the higher elasticity. So if I lower the price of that good, I'm going to sell a whole bunch more of that good, which is going to induce more sales of the other good too, right? So if I have both of them there, I can nudge people in the right direction. So I emailed Luke Frobe, your author of the textbook, and he sent me back an email and he's like, I didn't write this section of the book, but you're right, it sounds logical to me. So I kind of corrected him on it, and he sounded like, makes sense to me. So that was, I don't know, just seems to be logical. So but the main thing is we're always thinking about the elasticities and which one and how they're working together and what our customers want. Okay, so another issue is the overall picture for revenues. Cruise ships, hotels, stadiums, commercial parking lots. What do they have in common as we say that? What comes to mind? You need to fill, so they're like bigger numbers with a maximum number of seats, right? You want to fill the seats, but we also have a maximum number, right? So we can only have so many beds on the cruise ship. We only have so many seats in the stadium, parking spots. So how does that change things in terms of pricing behavior if we have a capacity constraint?
Prices would be the highest list they would be attractive.
And to what level?
Where you're going to price them high enough so you're not going to attract people like too early, if that makes sense. Sure.
Yeah, but I want to think about the capacity. So we want to set it to capacity. So think about it on the demand curve. If we're talking about the Kansas City Chiefs team, how many seats does the stadium hold? Is it like 70,000? Or is it higher than that?
75, I think.
Yeah, let's just say it's 75,000. It's kind of a Q max, right? So capacity is at 75,000. So where should we price our tickets? Yeah, we're right. We're going to have different viewing angles, but let's just take average. I'm just trying to keep it simple. Highest you can that still fills the stadium, which is different than what we do with some other things. So whatever that price is that gets us to 75,000, that would be the optimal price. Because if we have our price too low, what happens at the game if the price is here at P2? We'll oversell, but we won't really oversell, right? We'll just hit our maximum. So we'd have 80,000 people that want to go to the stadium, but we kind of left a lot of money on the table, right? Because we could have charged, on average, let's say $100 a seat, but at $90 a seat, we had them kind of too cheap. Now, the problem is if we go 110, now we're at 70,000. And we're like, oh crap, we could have sold more. Now that depends a little bit on the elasticity here, on where if charge them high enough and people think they're getting the value and all that jazz would come in. But otherwise, as Jacob was saying, if we could sell the cheap seats cheaper to get the capacity up in the nosebleeds, we'd want to sell that extra 5,000 seats, right? Because they're just sitting there being unused. Did you guys hear that ad on the radio for, I don't know how it works, I've just heard it a few times about empty seats getting given to vets as a veteran's benefit? Nobody's heard that? I don't know where I heard that on, but they're talking, some group is saying, you know, all the seats that go unused at a stadium, we could give to the veterans as kind of a veteran's benefit. And so somehow they're trying to bring that together as a concept. So I can imagine, you know, they'd have to be thinking, at least the companies that would buy into that, is that if you have, if 70% of the people who go to the Kansas City Chiefs game are veterans, would that be a good thing for them to do? No, right? Because then, so again, you kind of have to know your customers on what whether that might be a good deal or not, or whether you should participate in it. Okay, so capacity straits are kind of interesting. Capacity constraints. All right, so sunk costs or fixed costs for capacity. So if we think about building a stadium, how would that be considered like a sunk cost or a fixed cost? In other words, what's the cost of additional seats once you've built the 75,000 seat stadium?
So I mean, like the sunk cost would be like the material you bring in, right?
Yeah. So the seat is there, right? It's been paid for. So it's either a sunk cost or it's part of the building. You took out a loan for the building for the 75,000 seat stadium, and the loan is the same no matter if the seats go filled or not, right? So the seats are either fixed or sunk, which makes the marginal cost of putting another person in the seat high or low. The marginal cost of putting another individual in the seat as the stadium owner. So now you're Lamar Hunt, right? Lamar Hunt, the Kansas City Chiefs. You own the stadium. What's the marginal cost of putting another person in the seat? Is it a high cost or low cost? Low, right? It's very low. So it's like, oh, you want to come in for $2? Well, that's $2 I wouldn't have earned, right? So if somebody comes to the gate and they're like, oh, hey, Lamar, I know you're a billionaire, but I'll give you $2 for the seat. And he's like, well, it's just sitting here, and maybe you'll come in and you'll buy a beer or a Coke or some popcorn too, right? So the marginal cost of an additional seat is next to nothing for these types of concepts once you've committed to it. All right, so how much capacity do we build? So the main thing we're bringing up with this exercise is to think through two different things that are going on. The first step of the process, when you're Lamar Hunt thinking how big of a stadium do I build, now in the long run, everything is variable, right? Everything's a variable cost. So you've got a long run marginal cost and long run marginal revenue. So Lamar Hunt's sitting there and like, okay, let's see. Well, I think we can sell each seat for X amount, and I think if we go from 75,000, if we do 76,000 seats, the architect tells me that's going to be X amount of materials. We're going to have to add on. We're going to have to add some structural supports to the stadium, you know, because here we got the stadium. Well, if we add another row of 1,000 seats, then we're going to have to put in more metric tons of concrete here to beef up the structural integrity of the building. You see where I'm going with this? So everything has a variable to it when we're talking about the number of seats. And so then we're going to make our decision here, and we're going to say, yep, 75,000 is the profit maximizing, oops, I didn't mean to put a dollar sign, 75,000 seats is the profit maximizing size of the stadium that we should do. But once we open up, that all changes to fixed costs. Once that seat is built, the calculus that we had with the amount of cost of the seats totally changes. Once it's built, it's done, and now we have a different set of issues that we're going to be facing. And so now we want to put it to capacity, kind of circling back to what we said before. The cost is so low, so let's price it such that we get 75,000 at the stadium. Find out the price of tickets that's going to max out the place. All right. Questions? So, 100, 110, this is hard to do, right? We're not going to be able to perfectly forecast exactly where that seat is. It might be through a lot of trial and error. For the Kansas City Chiefs, how many home games are there? 8. So you can think in terms of statistics, is 8 a large enough sample size to really do a lot of trial and error to make sure? No, 8's pretty small, right? So already that's going to make our job a little bit difficult to figure out what that optimal price is. And then on top of that, what else factors into people's demand for Kansas City Chiefs seats? The weather, their opponent, how they're doing is probably the most unknown thing, right?
Whether it's like preseason or playoff.
Yeah, preseason or playoff. So we got regular season versus that. Like regular season versus preseason, we're going to have data on that though, right? We're going to kind of know that. If they're playing the Raiders or they're playing the Arizona Cardinals, we're going to know that the Cardinal game is not going to have the same demand as the Raider game or whatever, right? So again, some of our historical circumstances are going to make it easier for us to price the individual games. But ultimately, if Mahomes, I almost don't want to say this, breaks a leg on game 1, and like I said, I almost didn't want to say that. Please, where's knock on wood, like you don't junk on that. So, but if something happens that's completely unknown, that might screw the Chiefs season, you know, for the other games being filled up later in the year, right? You just don't know. So there could be some things that is going to make that pretty difficult to figure out. All right, questions or comments there? All right, so new hotel. We're going to keep adding rooms as long as marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost in the long run. So this is kind of that two-step process. So add rooms as long as revenue is greater than cost. We're going to optimally figure out the number of hotel rooms where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So if we're at 1.66 for an elasticity and the optimal size is estimated to be 300 rooms, at the optimal size, annualized long-run marginal cost of the building, cleaning, heating the room is about $400 per day. And so pre-build expected marginal revenue and marginal cost. So we got $400 a day. We've kind of done the whole process. Short-run marginal cost is $40 a day when fixed costs are ignored. So what would go into short-run cost at $40 per day for a hotel? What are we doing for? Yeah, laundry, the towels. What else? Huh? Pool upkeep. Breakfast for the number of rooms we sell. Good. Little shampoos. Good. The cleaning is probably the big expense there, right? So we have the person who's going to come and clean your room at it. So all of those things shrink pretty dramatically from $400 per day, which is building the hotel, the cost of the bed, the cost of the, all of that stuff, and now it's going to drop to $40 per day. So that can be a big difference. So if demand was overestimated pre-build, so the developer had some rose-colored glasses, which I've been known to wear on some of my apartment projects before, what should the rooms be priced at if actual occupancy is 250 rooms at 400? So they open up the hotel, Trump Plaza, $400 a night, and we're at 250 rooms being sold. So if demand was overestimated, what should the rooms be priced at? So I have this here as a hint. We can try to figure this out. So why don't you guys talk to your neighbor. You guys can chat online if you want, those of you online. So this is the elasticity formula. What should the rooms be priced at? Or you can think about the percentage change. I'll come around the room, and you guys online, you can kind of show me what you're doing. If you got any questions, but I want you to be able to use that formula.
I can't see the formula.
Okay. See if I can get it right in there. I'm just curious if we can make the room. I think it's the lighting right now, but can you see that better now? Percentage change in price equals percentage change in quantity divided by the elasticity. It's just it's the elasticity formula. Can you see that now? Just curious. Yes, Alex? Okay. I really need to go through and change these overheads to being black. Ah! Look. You get it. So 250, so drop the price from 400 to 250. Okay. What you do? Okay, so what do we want the quantity to change by? How many rooms are we trying to sell? 300 total. Where are we at now? 250. So in terms of the percentage change in quantity, we want to increase it by that percentage change. Right? So 50, we want to sell 50 more, and we're currently at 250. So our new number minus our old number, there's and for this particular problem, that's kind of what you want to think about. Is what is the percentage change in quantity from 250 up to 300? And then you can solve for the percentage change in price. So here I used the average thing that we did with the elasticities, the ARC method. So 275 was the average between 300 and 250. And so the percentage change is 50 divided by 275 is at 18%. So the percentage change in quantity is 18%. And so if we did the 18% divided by the elasticity of 1.66, then we get an 11% decrease in price. So it's kind of just working a little bit of algebra to kind of think about the relationship. The main thing is getting the concept of, we can use some of the elasticity and other things to get the size of the changes we want. All right, questions on that? Question? Good?
Yeah.
Good enough?
I was just saying, like, this sometimes it confuses me, and it, like, even on the homework, what I think is the right answer, I just go with the complete opposite, and that'll be what's right.
Okay, well, hopefully we can come up with even better ways, but yes, I get you. All right, so biases. So this gets into some of the human aspects of pricing, and behavioral economics has been kind of a big area over the years. So what are our biases? So an example, in 2008, they took away our peanuts. They took away our peanuts. So when the airline took away peanuts, guess how people felt about that? They were mad. Now let's think in the grand scheme of things. What does an airline flight run nowadays? Just for going somewhere from Kansas City to, a couple 3-hour flight. A couple $100. 300, let's call it $300, right? And so for $300, how much is that little bag of peanuts? 50 cents maybe, right? So at most 50 cents. So 50 cents out of a $300 airline ticket, you'd be thinking, oh, no big deal, right? But people were outraged by that because we kind of, again, culturally got used to that. And same thing with maybe charging parking in different cultures. They're like, oh, I'm not paying parking. I've never paid for parking, right? $1 parking, and you just bought a $200, you just spent $200 at Dick's Sporting Goods or something. It's relatively small, but it can make you feel different. So part of what this behavioral economics does is kind of considers how people feel about the purchase, because that's going to be important in how they ultimately act and whether they buy the product or not. And so one of those things that we found out with the peanuts was that people have this loss aversion where they feel loss more than they feel gains. So how to think about this is to say, if you were given the peanuts and you weren't expecting them, like you bought your airline ticket and you were given the peanuts, how do you feel about them giving you this little bag of peanuts? Well, the idea here is that you're gaining less than what you did if you were expecting it when you came on. So the loss hurts more than the gain for the actual same product you're getting, or the same value of something. The loss hurts you more than the gain. And this especially becomes a problem with long-term retirement investing. People are so scared of losing money that they don't put their money into the right type of investment products that they should be for long-term retirement, something with some risk to it. Like, oh, I don't want to do stocks because stocks are risky. And if they get a loss in their investments, that hurts them more than when the stock market goes up. So if their stocks go up by 2%, they don't, that win, that feeling of, they're happy, of course. Oh, they went up by 2%, that's good. It's solid, I did a good job. But then if the stocks go down by 2%, it's like, oh, I better sell. Oh, I'm going to die. I'm never going to be able to retire with dignity. I'm going to be one of those people at Walmart that are greeting people, and the world's coming to an end, right? So the same value of the up or down had a different impact on people. So that's something that's a relatively recent field in economics called behavioral economics. And the Nobel Prize went to Richard Thaler in the last, I think, 4 years, within the last 4 years. And so he's done some work in different areas of that. One was with the retirement, and that was whether you opt in or not for the retirement plan. And so he did a number of experiments where different companies said, check this box if you want to not do the retirement plan, or check this box if you want to do the retirement plan. Now, from an economic standpoint, the rational agent comes up there and says, oh, well, I'll just check the box if I want it or not. I go through the calculation, and yep, I should do it, or yep, I should not. But what they found when real human beings went up there is that if you think that the status quo is to have the retirement plan, everybody's doing the retirement plan, but hey, if you don't want it, check this box and you can opt out of it. They got a significant difference in the results depending on whether you were opting in to the retirement plan or opting out of the retirement plan. Right? So totally doesn't make sense from kind of the rational rational paradigm that the author talked about in chapter 1, that it shouldn't matter how we phrase that, but it turns out to matter. And so that's one of these behavioral economics areas. Okay, questions or comments there? Framing is another area on how you ask the questions. So when you do, this is especially important with survey type data. If depending on how you ask the question, you might get different responses from people. Again, even though, let's say the nuts and bolts of the question are the same, like yes or no. Do you, there's another thing called priming, where in some of the religious surveys, they might get different responses of like, did you attend church last Sunday? Yes or no? Yes or no, or whatever. And then, do you feel like you should give to this charity? And so by having the person primed with thoughts of church prior to answering that next question, you'll get different answers. So really some unusual stuff that's kind of fun that they've learned over time. All right. Ownership bias is another one. I can't remember if we... Okay, I'll come back to that, but I like the ownership bias too. So they did a little experiment where, imagine you guys come into the class and there's a coffee mug or let's say your water bottle sitting on the table. Just as you come into your seat, there's a water bottle sitting on the table. And they said, oh, we're going to have a little experiment today. What do you think? These are all gifts for you. The coffee mug's sitting there, and so it's a special sponsor from Chick-fil-A in town. And what do you think that water bottle's worth? And they're like, oh, I think it's worth $5 or whatever. Everybody gives their answer. And then instead, the next class comes in, and they hold up. The water bottles aren't on the table this time. And they say, we've got these water bottles here. We wanted to do an experiment. What do you think these are worth? And here you can touch and feel it and see it and get close to it. What do you think it's worth? Which one do you think they valued more? The ones that they owned or the ones that they didn't own? The ones they owned were worth more. So people have this ownership bias that if they own it, it's mine, it must be worth a lot, right? And so real estate agents really struggle with this too, because you go into their home and you're like, okay, well, yeah, I pretty much got this sized up. This thing will probably sell for $130,000. And so the real estate agent wants to get the business, and they're like, well, Joe homeowner, what do you think this is worth? Oh, I think it's worth $150,000. Right? So they already are inflating the price, not wanting to look at data and other things. Well, this was my house, and I planted those hostas in the backyard, and see how beautiful they are. So they can't get over that ownership attachment that they have. Okay. So fairness. Yeah, we kind of see this with the natural disasters. So companies have to be careful to appear to be fair anyway, even though economists might argue that not raising the prices might cause some problems in a disaster. That if we don't allow prices to go up, then we don't allow people from 2 states over to economically be able to afford to drive truckloads of water to the state where the natural disaster's at, right? So by not allowing market prices to rise to what people are willing to pay, we don't get the reaction from other places, perhaps. Not in all cases, you know, I mean, even I don't like the idea of gouging prices and taking advantage, but there's been a number of different studies where that can actually help things by letting prices go up. Yeah?
Isn't that illegal though, during natural disasters?
Yeah, it can be. So it's under this price gouging law, but generally it's very, very hard to prove. And you have to kind of show that it's way above normal rather than a little bit above normal. So you don't see too many cases of people getting busted for that. Okay, so sometimes people have to get creative. So this is kind of a interesting case. I think, who was it? Taylor Swift got into some trouble years ago with this. That they could buy their own tickets and sell them on the secondary market. So they would keep the prices low so that their fans think that, oh, they're really nice. Oh, Taylor just, you know, all those other bands are charging such high prices, but Taylor's awesome. But then Taylor would buy up a lot of the extra prices and sell them on the secondary ticket price for the $300 seats or the $500 seats, right? They kind of keep those to themselves. And so usually when we have policies that are put in place to try to fix one thing, it creates a loophole in some other place, right? So the market tends to win out, typically in one way or the other, maybe through some unexpected ways. All right, that is it. Let's take a break. So price discrimination sounds, you know, evil, especially in today's day and age. Any sort of discrimination, oh, it must be bad. But it's simply charging different prices to different people for the same good, which still might not even make you feel much better about it. But I should put discrimination value on price. Okay, there we go. Price discrimination, indirect. That's not the one I want. I swear this news. Oh, here we go. This is it. Hold on, just kind of. All right, so let's see here. Just this line.
You assume that every product or service is a price.
Okay, here we go.
says is a price. All customers pay the same price. In this store, everybody pays the same price for a particular thing like a mug. But in many markets, not everyone pays the same price for the same good or service. Some people pay more, others less. For instance, people on this aircraft are paying different prices, even though they're on the same journey. This is my first experience of flying with EasyJet. I paid about £125 for the return flight. But there are people on this flight who pay substantially more, and others who pay substantially less. It's not just one flight, there's a whole range of different prices. Companies all over the world are looking for ways to maximize profits. One of the ways that some of them do this is through the process of price discrimination. This pig farm in Texas is owned by a Japanese wheat company. They sell the same pork in the US and in Japan. But in Japan, the prices they charge are much higher. This holiday company sells the same holiday to different customers at different prices. Rail companies in Europe charge different prices to commuters and students for the same journey. Firms commonly charge different prices for the same product to different customers. This is true in hotels, it's true on airlines, it's true on the railways. People who are traveling are not all paying the same price for the journey. The principle of charging different prices for the same product we call price discrimination. This program examines the practice of price discrimination, explores the circumstances in which companies are able to do it, asks whether this practice is beneficial for the company and for the consumer.
Okay, what other examples of price discrimination can you think of?
Movie theater.
Movie theater, in what respect?
Sometimes like students will get like discounts or
Okay.
yeah, different time of the day or like different days sometimes.
Okay, yeah, so different time of the day is different than the student's one, right? So it's still the same movie, it's still the same theater, but it is a different time of the day. So it's a slight variant, but yeah, it's a form of price discrimination. But it's a little bit different than like the student and the other person sitting right next to each other at the same film and the same thing. Now they can't sit in the same seat, but at the same time we didn't restrict that. Well, that's the student section over there. You gotta go to stay, of course, go to basketball games in those places, right? But so each person would have potentially could have chose that seat on a first come first served basis. Okay, good. What else? Buffets. What do you mean?
Like if you're under a certain age.
Okay, so for ages, yes. Okay, Jason, what did you say? The senior discount, yeah. So senior coffee at McDonald's or some other places. Yeah.
So our athletes get discount off like Adidas apparel. They go through a school.
Okay, so a student discount through that. Okay, good. I was hoping you were going to bring up something else with athletes, but.
With like a car dealership that charges a different price in different locations.
Not even necessarily different locations, but yeah, different prices for the same new car. Yeah, that's price discrimination for sure.
Talking about tuition with athletes.
Yeah, what about it?
So athletes get scholarship.
So did we price discriminate at Ottawa University? Oh yeah. Does everybody get the same scholarship on the same team? Oh no. Right? So we price discriminate all the time at Ottawa University. Okay? What else? Loyalty programs. Yeah, that's another form of price discrimination. Yes. So if you build up even points or other things, that's another way to do it. Jason, what were you thinking?
I was gonna say people like coupons, like newspapers still.
Okay, yeah. So coupons and newspapers or even online coupons, that sort of thing. What about you guys online? Alex, Karen? Joshua. I want you each to give me an example of price discrimination.
Could they be coupons also offered for people's information on a specific product?
Yeah, that's a good one. You know, if you start trying to get their information, it's kind of changing it a little bit because you're kind of paying for the information. So I would say that one's kind of a little bit of a wild card. I'd say that's probably not perfectly price discrimination in kind of its purest form, but yeah, that's an interesting one to bring up. Okay, Karen, Alex?
So like I participate in a rewards program for diapers, so I pay less for diapers.
Okay, good. All right. And Karen?
Yes, I was thinking about being a grocery store member where you can pay a cheaper price than if you're not a member.
So are you thinking like even with like Costco, or are you talking about just the little card, the thing that the value rewards type card?
Yeah, like the value rewards.
Okay, yeah, so that would be another form too, and Costco's membership is kind of a two-tiered pricing system that we'll kind of get into in a different way also. So we got all these kind of funny things going on, and so we want to think about the differences between, so both chapters go over something called, the first chapter 13 is direct price discrimination, and the next chapter is indirect price discrimination. So both chapters kind of go hand in hand. They could have almost been one chapter in a sense. Both are tackling something similar. So for direct price discrimination, we've got three things that you need to have happen. So we call it direct price discrimination because we're going to isolate out individual consumers. So you need three things. So again, the price discrimination in general is charging different prices to different people for the same product. And that's, again, that's kind of the general definition for price discrimination. So we got three key things that are needed to be a successful price discriminator. So number one is you need consumers with differing demands. So consumers with differing demands for the goods, differing demand curves. In other words, they need different elasticities of demand. So we can't have identical human beings, essentially, where if people's preferences for the good tend to be very uniform, then it's not going to work as well. So we want to be able to do something different. So people's preferences for milk, for instance, tend to be pretty uniform across human beings in general. Like when you get rich, you're like, oh, I'm gonna buy gallons of milk now that I'm rich, right? You kind of tend to buy, you either put milk in your cereal or you don't put milk in your cereal, or you don't eat cereal at all. So your milk purchases tend to be pretty stable over time, or maybe not over time, but over a slice of time among individuals. So we need different demand curves for different people. Number two is you need to be able to separate out the consumers. You need to be able to legally separate consumers in these types. So skin color, religion, all of that stuff could be a theoretical possibility, but you might end up in jail, right? So if you want to avoid jail, you need to be able to legally separate out consumers. So you guys brought up students, right? So you can legally separate out students with the student ID, student versus non-student. And you have to be able to tell them apart from each other, is the other key thing. So you got to be able to legally be able to separate consumers. So how do we usually separate who's a student, who's a non-student? Do we just eyeball them? ID. So usually we have an ID that's at least hard to fabricate, although in today's day and age, I'm not sure that's true, but you know, so we have the student ID that might allow us a mechanism to separate out the groups, to verify who they are when they come to the cash register. I'm a student, here's my student ID. Okay, and then the last one here is we need the product to not have easy resale. So it's either impossible or difficult to resell the product or service. So the movie theater student discount, pretty hard for them to resell. Whereas if it was a student discount at the liquor store or something, then it might be a little more difficult, since Alex has got his liquor store training. How was Vegas, by the way? Speaking of
Blast. Yeah. A lot of interesting sights and sounds.
A lot of interesting sights and sounds, indeed, yes. Okay, well, maybe we'll talk more about those sights and sounds later in class. But, if you have a product that's easy to resell, why would that not work for you to offer a student discount? So let's just say at the liquor store, it's a 15% student discount. You come in and you can get 15% off. How could this come to harm you as the liquor store company? Yeah, so the person who buys it could resell it, and if they're able to do that, then you might not be selling any liquor to the non-students, because those crafty little students that took my economics class are going to start up their own little business and sell it to them. So then if we end up selling all of our booze at a 15% discount, we didn't win anything. All we did was we cut our price. What we're trying to do is sell booze to people who can afford to pay more, maybe the non-students versus the students. In order to do that successfully, we need that. So these are the three conditions that we need to be a successful price discriminator. Okay, so let's just do a little bit of demand. I'm not going to get too hardcore on this, but maybe since we had our talk with the markets last week, and I'm thinking about the demand curves. So let's put 3 demand curves side by side with each other. And so here we've got students, non-students, and then we have kind of everybody here, the full market. So how are demand curves built? Well, students might have a demand curve that looks like this, and non-students, let's say, looks like this. We're just going to put 2 different demand curves. Those demand curves are going to have different elasticities, so we're following condition number 1 here. And so if our bottle of, what bottle of booze are we drinking tonight? Jack, I heard Jack first. So we got a bottle of Jack. We're at, what's our bottle of Jack running? 23.50. So at 23.50, at 23.50, how many students are buying Jack? 0. So they're on Evan Williams or whatever, right? So there's something less. No Jacks being sold. And so, but at 23.50, we have a couple non-students and we're selling 10 bottles of Jack, right? So then if we were to map out the market over here, in the marketplace, the market demand curve would have 10 bottles being sold. All of them are non-students. Okay, so that's fine. So the question then comes, when can we start to get students into the market? So if we start to drop the price here, I'm going to go right to this endpoint. So let's just say that this is at $12. So at $12 a bottle, we still got 0. We've got the non-students increasing their price to their quantity to 15. So this market, this demand curve is really just mapping out the non-student demand. And then once we drop into this range, we all of a sudden hit the jackpot, and students are doing shooters of Jack apples or something here at $9, because now you price it at $9 and you pick up 20 bottles being sold to students. The non-students continue to bring up their quantity a little bit to 17. And so we've got 37 bottles being sold in the market. So the point with kind of bringing you through all this is to think about how the market demand curve gets derived, right? There's really individual people, ultimately, every person would have a different demand curve for Jack. But if we start to see some segments of the market have a different demand curve, these students versus non-students for whatever reason, then we've got some potential here to do some price discrimination if we can separate them out legally and it's not too hard or it's too difficult for them to resell, which Jack's probably not a good example of that. So bear with me on that part. All right, so now how do we... Now this is where this thing's going to get a little ugly, so I'm hesitating whether we should even do this next part. But what I want to do is see if we can separate the markets. Instead of selling 37 bottles at $9, can I somehow get these guys to pay more? Right? So how can I get these guys to pay more for the bottles? If I can separate them out, then I should be able to do that. And so I can raise the bottles for the non-students is one way to think about it. And depending on the elasticity, I'm going to price this according to that formula we did earlier. Right? So I'm just going to treat these guys in a profit maximizing way, not even really worrying about the students, since I'm able to separate them. So I'm essentially just treating each marketplace individually. And so I'm not going to draw in the marginal revenue curve. It's going to get more uglier than we need to. But whatever that price turns out to be of marginal revenue and marginal cost for the students. So price for the non-students is where marginal revenue equals marginal cost for them. And the price that we're going to charge students is where marginal revenue equals marginal cost for them. Okay, so questions on this? The non-student, I just put the price of the non-student, I put P subscript NS. Price for the non-students is where, so we're just going to optimally choose for each one individually. But I don't think at this point, maybe you guys quite saw how individual demands sum up to be the market demand. So when Levi went through the industry stuff, we're just looking over here, right? We're not really thinking about them being separated like this. But for this chapter, it's important to think that, hey, we got different people here, and if I'm able to treat them separately, I should. I should try to charge the highest price they're willing to pay for each. Okay, any other comments or questions so far? Okay, I'm going to go into a little PowerPoint mode here then. Okay, so there's what we just wrote on the board, 3 keys for successful price discrimination. What we call that resale opportunity is, in general, arbitrage. So perfect arbitrage is if you're able to buy in one market and sell in another, basically risk-free. Right? If I'm able to buy in one market, which sounds like a great thing to do, but competition keeps that from happening. Right? So we don't have arbitrage opportunities in a highly competitive market because people are going to be exploiting those little opportunities. That's what keeps market prices efficient. All right, so indirect price discrimination happens when we can't ID groups. So you mentioned the airline. Who has a higher willingness to pay? Who has a higher demand or less elastic demand? A business traveler or a vacation traveler? Business traveler has a higher willingness to pay, right? They'd be willing to pay higher prices. Can the airlines identify the business traveler and the vacation traveler? Are they able to pull out their student ID, their business traveler ID, and say, oh, I'm on business? And you know how they ask you on the thing, like, is this for business or is this for pleasure or vacation, right? So they're not able to separate you ahead of time, but yet, gosh, it'd be nice if we could make some money. We could charge higher prices to business travelers. So since we can't separate them, what could we do? Create a business class, okay, good. That's one thing for sure.
Find something that they give that's different, so like a business person might buy later.
Okay, yeah, so business travelers tend to buy later. So this is always confusing if you don't really think through it. So if an airline is half empty and they had the seats at $300 like we were talking about, the day before the trip, wouldn't they want to drop the price to like $200 to fill them up, right? Kind of like that capacity problem that we had. It seems like they might want to do that, but they don't for a couple different reasons. One is they want to be able to plan flights into the future, so they don't want everybody waiting until the day before to get the cheap flight if they knew that they did that. So that's certainly a driving thing. But probably just as important is the business traveler. So the business traveler, within 2 weeks, needs to be in New York to close a business deal. And that just kind of came about. And they're doing a $50,000 business deal to close this. So whether the ticket's $2,000 or $1,000 or $500, they don't really care, right? They're not too sensitive to price at that point. And so they can charge higher. So that does open up seats. So as we get closer to the date, the seat prices tend to go up, and they'll fill them up. I finally figured out Southwest a little bit on airline prices. So they're kind of my favorite airline. And have you guys noticed ever, I don't know how much you fly. I fly quite a bit, so I get a chance to kind of experiment. But they'll say only 3 seats left. And what I found was that that's not true. Like, I knew that there was more seats on this flight. Like, I later learned that the flight was still going. So at some point, I figured out what happens is that Southwest has a certain amount of seats that they're going to have at, let's just say, $250. And then as soon as those seats are sold, they'll put that little thing, like only 2 seats left, but it's really only 2 seats left at that price. So then once those sell, then they raise the price for the remaining seats. So it is actually better to book a little earlier if you can, at least with Southwest. That's the way I figured out their algorithm works, is that they raise the price so more seats come open, but they might raise them by just like 10, 15 bucks. Because I've had that happen to me. Like, I checked the next day and it's like, oh yeah, well, I had this, you know, at 250 and now it's 265. So it's not that they ran out of seats, but the seats are actually going up in price. And then, of course, that can push you into the business class. Those who wait to the very end, there still might be well, Southwest, you can sit anywhere on the plane, but they give you a few extra perks, and they call it business class because you get to board earlier and whatever, all that. So they differentiate the product a little bit that way. So, so that's an example of indirect price discrimination through the timing of when they sell the product. All right, questions or comments there? A few more examples we'll go through too. Well, and really the following chapter is the one that gets in. All right, so indirect or direct. Tickets to movie theaters. Senior discounts, student discounts, direct or indirect? Direct. Grocery store, discount coupons. In-store weekly, you guys brought up that. Indirect or direct? Indirect, right? So anybody can use the coupon. So why don't higher income people tend to use coupons? Because it's a pain in the ass, right? You got to cut it out and you got to go out there, and maybe they're even a little embarrassed. Oh, I don't need to have 50 cents off. But at the end of the day, they don't really care getting 50 cents off of a can of soup when you're making $100,000 a year. It's like, okay, that's more trouble than it's worth, right? So they're doing their own little cost-benefit analysis, and so they tend not to use that coupon anyway. So, but there are the millionaires out there that will cut coupons, right? So they can't keep rich people from cutting coupons. We're not able to separate them. Airlines, business economy, direct or indirect? Indirect, right? So we're not able to separate them. And okay, so we did price discrimination. We talked about a few. How does Ottawa University do it?
Scholarships.
So scholarships of what form? Academic and athletic. We got the music scholarships, right? The Ottawa Indians, that's another good one, right? Which that one's a little bit different because of the contractual relationship that we had before with the Ottawa Indians. But yeah, so we're able to kind of package things together and basically charge different prices. So where you get where it gets kind of funny with Ottawa that I've tried to mention over time is you don't want to give away too much scholarship, but you got to get them here, right? So you're kind of like, oh, okay, well, and the coaches know this because they have a fixed amount of scholarship budget that they can give out, and so they're thinking, oh, this kid seems like he really wants to come. You know, I've got enough room to give him 75% tuition scholarship, but I don't want to. He seems kind of interested. I'm going to float him a 60%. Right? I don't know if the coaches really play that game, but I would if I was them because they got a fixed budget. So whoever that athlete is, they really, since their scholarship amount is fixed, want to give them the lowest scholarship possible that induces them to come. Because otherwise they put too much on the table and they might be missing out on another athlete that they could have given a higher scholarship to, right? So it's all about kind of figuring out what is that kid's demand? What does their demand curve for Ottawa University look like? We talk to them, we learn about their parents. What car did they drive in? Was it a crappy car or was it a Lamborghini, right? What does that kid's demand curve look like for Ottawa University? And that's going to determine how much scholarship we need to put out. So that's kind of the process that we go through at OU. Comments or questions there? Little do they know we're discriminating. I think they do know it, but if we had that title up there, we might make the headlines somewhere, or at least be slammed on social media. Okay, cell phone pricing. So we've got, let me let you guys read through this one. This is a little bit longer. I'll comment. Okay, so this is like, Nokia or whatever. So we got this IRK, worldwide company, uniform price 120. They're kind of ignoring some of the developing countries or lower income countries. So what issues may IRK face if they start charging a lower price in the Philippines to generate more sales?
They impact their markets in the wealthier countries.
How? How would it affect the markets?
Because of how they value the phone. They may not pay as much for it because they may not see it as
You mean if they know that they're doing it, they might change their valuation? Okay, that's a possibility. I mean, how up on the Filipinos are we here in the United States? You guys all know you're from Malaysia originally, so even you, do you know the Philippines very good?
Yeah, no,
Any more than Americans do?
not really.
Okay, not really, right? I mean, do we pay attention to other countries? For the most part, no. I went to South Africa, so I learned a lot about South Africa, but going there, I didn't know much about it. I learned a lot just being there, right? So my point is, I think that would be a little bit of a stretch for just the average consumer out there who's more concerned about themselves, looking inward. Okay, what else? What other issues? That's a possibility, though. I think there's a lot bigger looming thing out there. If they start selling cheap phones to the Filipinos.
Will it stop people from like entering the market because like no one can match their price almost? Like, and then,
that would help them if they entered it in, because they're offering it at lower. So yeah, it would help keep competitors out.
So we'll probably have to change prices other places are too, right? Because people start thinking, in the Philippines are getting the same phone for, a lower cost portion of their currency. They're not going to pay that.
Yeah, but that's kind of similar to what he was saying. So think about the three conditions that I just laid out for price discrimination. Which one might cause a problem for IRK? Resell. Yes. So now it's the business person in the Philippines thinking, oh, these are cheaper. I could go back to the United States and sell these phones, right? So that resell condition is an important one. Okay, so we had the fallout a little bit on the consumers, like you were saying, there might be an issue there. And so they started back in 97, and they ended up having a pretty good response over time. This was the forecast for it. So they went to $90 and found some problems with resale in the European markets. This is what we were predicting. A little arbitrage, buy in the Filipino market, resell. So, you guys had SIM locks on phones or heard about them being locked out? And so sometimes when you go on eBay, they're like, oh, this one's unlocked or this one's locked. Well, that's what the companies are dealing with. So those models are basically identical phones. They might have, did a different color or something, changed something minor. But that's what they're trying to do in certain areas with SIM locks. So then some Turkish hackers broke the SIM lock, and we had 15,000 phones going to Western Europe. So that's the type of thing you're battling if there's potential for resale. That's just one extra thing. Oh, we'll just have the engineers come up with a lock for it. Well, and then that gets figured out. So there's always that profit incentive that's going to be driving people to try to break it down if there is some resale possibilities. All right, well, it turned out to have these results. So it worked. So after they kind of fought getting their foot in the door in that market, then they went back to selling the same price worldwide so that they didn't have to worry with the copycats. And that first mover advantage that maybe you've heard about in some other classes, right, where you're the first one to the market and people are just people and they're like, oh, I don't want to change my phone, or this one's kind of nice. So we tend to kind of stick with things that we have, and that did get the results that they were looking for. Okay. So what company do we usually point to that drives small companies out of business?
Walmart.
Walmart. So were they breaking this Robinson-Patman Act?
They bought their supplier.
Yeah, well, possibly if they bought it, but yeah, we kind of got into buying. So what does Walmart do differently?
More contracts, or not more contracts, but long-term contracts.
With purchasing contracts.
Yeah.
For purchasing the products. Yeah. So they're not giving discounts on something where they're tied together real tightly. So here, this act was just trying to keep people that were getting big to getting these artificial discounts. Sounds like pretty much competition to me of why they wouldn't want to do that. So this one's been kind of difficult for them to do, but the United States has come up with laws over time to try to level the playing field, even though they might be hurting it. But if companies are able to keep competition out because they're bigger, and then they're a monopoly, and then they can just charge whatever they want. So that's what this was trying to avoid.
So is this still law?
Yes. So, but it's rarely enacted.
Well, I'm just thinking because like the wording, like I think about the bar, right? We go like buy liquor from certain liquor stores, and there's a 10% discount from the bar. Is that the same thing? The liquor store is giving a discount on the liquors to us.
Yeah, not on, as long as they're doing it for every bar.
Okay.
In the same way, so that it's not just your bar. Yeah. I think that's where the distinction comes in. Okay, so the problem is that we do this all the time for volume discounts, right? And if you're a big company, you're buying more volume, well, don't we give volume discounts? So that's where that Robinson-Patman Act doesn't always get put into place that often. so laptops, this is kind of fun. Makes you want to be careful a little bit when you're zipping through the internet and, oh, are you a large business or small business? Oh, I'm a small business. Click, 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 right? You start kind of clicking through. Well, this has gone on in the past where depending on what you self-select into, you had a different price. So what can companies do? What do computers do to still kind of do this? Charge higher prices to large. Here they were doing it for the exact same computer, depending on where you went on the website and dropped down whether you self-selected into large or small. And of course, once people figure this out, then they'll just call themselves a small business and get the cheaper price, right? So again, that whole resale possibilities and how you separate consumers, they're really not able to separate consumers very successfully here, potentially, right, with just clicking of a site. So because you can just self-select into here or here, and once the word's on the street, then you just go here and the price discrimination scheme won't work. So what do computer companies do?
Software, like they buy like student for office for business.
Okay.
Like 360 suite for student.
Yeah. So do some sort of variation, right? So they give a little bit more, like this one has, give me, what's the RAM speed nowadays? I don't know this stuff that good, I just give it a computer. Give me some sort of spec for a computer.
It has 16 gigs of RAM.
16 gigs of RAM. So 16 gigs of RAM, but the business version has 20 gigs of RAM, right? So we're a big business. We want the better computer. What's the best one you got? Well, that's our business grade that has 20 gigs versus 16 gigs. Oh yeah, we'll take that one. Now, what was the incremental cost of adding the 4 gigs? Probably really small. So just to make up some numbers here for fun, let's say it was $10 more to add 4 gigs onto the production line to make those computers a little bit different. So the cost was $10, but what I'm really trying to do is get these guys to buy the best computer, right? So I'm gonna push them into the higher price computer by at least making them a little different and a little better, even though the price change probably doesn't justify it. So that way we can kind of separate people out by doing a little bit of what we call versioning. Okay, questions or comments there? Does that make sense? All these little clever tricks you guys are learning on pricing. Okay, so your textbook author uses the schmuck word here. Consumers do not like knowing they are schmucks, right? How does that make you feel? Do you guys care that much about it or not? Do you agree? I agree too, yeah. So what it does for me is I will pretty much irrationally comb through the internet looking for every single price, spending way more time than I should, to make sure that I'm getting the best deal, right? So to make sure that we're getting the best deal. So we kind of can respond to that. So if you are doing a price discrimination scheme and you want to be in business for a long time, you better make sure that you're not making people feel that way when they learn that, oh, I could have gotten a better deal. I'm never going to go to them again. What do you do when you're shown a box for promotional code?
On my honey.
What's that?
Click on my honey extension.
Click on my honey?
Yeah, the honey extension on Google Chrome. So like anytime you go to like Amazon or a certain website, I have an extension on my browser called Honey. You click on it, it'll apply like every promotional code that's out there, and it'll immediately
how do I get some money?
Yeah, I was about to
It's
say.
free.
I've heard that, but I've heard that.
Is it a Google option?
It's Google Chrome extension.
So you just have to go into Google Chrome and just search in the browser?
The extensions. And it's called Honey.
Well, hell's bells, we're gonna do this right now. All right, teach me how to do this. So we go like up to here,
Yeah,
settings, options,
on
more tools,
just Google Honey extension.
Google Honey extension. Okay,
You can get admin authorization password on that.
Honey extension. This one?
Yeah.
Add to Chrome, it's free. Yeah, I probably won't be able to add it here, but add to Chrome. Join Honey. So somehow they're working with Chrome?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a bunch of things that, like our extensions you can download.
All right, here it comes. We're adding it right down here.
Okay, so all these times that I've been.
If when it'll do it. Oh, right here, this little guy?
Yeah.
Oh, cute.
So
Look at that.
anytime you like go to like, anytime you go to buy anything on any website online, if you click that, it'll apply basically anybody that hasn't downloaded any
All
kind
right,
of.
where should we go? Walmart or something, or
Amazon.
Amazon.
okay, Amazon. Okay, so what do I want to buy?
Backpack.
Backpack. All right, backpack.
That was just the first thing I saw.
Backpack for women, since you said that. Okay, this one. And so now I click the Honey button.
Normally it's like when you're in your checkout process, there's like, it has the area to.
Oh no, well here it brought up that. I don't know if that was related to that backpack. I think it is. Huh. But otherwise, when you go to checkout.
Yeah, so like when you go to checkout, it's like, it gives you an option to enter a promo code. If you click the Honey app, it'll like automatically apply any promo code.
It'll put it right in there?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, yes. I've heard about it, but that's why I wanted to do it. Here, Honey, look at it. It brought up a little thing here.
You gonna buy a backpack?
Right here. Watch this item for price drop. Sign into Honey, and this will be the drop list. Ah.
Yeah. So
All right. There we go.
Create account and all like notify you that drop. There's no.
So believe it or not, this is related to the lecture tonight because we're talking about how to overcome price discrimination schemes. So this is exactly right in line.
I
That's why
definitely agree. That should be on the quiz.
no, maybe it will
Was
be.
it Honey
Yeah.
or was it Bumblebee that we used?
So what they found with the clicks is that they'll lose the shoppers. So if they saw a promotional box, they would start looking for the coupon and never come back to buy the product. So sometimes you got to be careful with how you set up these schemes. So if you know you can get a deal, then they don't like knowing that, so they try to sometimes keep it a little more secret. All right, so conference pricing. So how would they prevent arbitrage if they're offering a discount to foreign participants? They have higher travel costs, and there's kind of a justification here that we could drop the price for foreigners coming in. How can they prevent that arbitrage?
You come to the door, maybe you have to have like a photo ID, like your home address.
Okay, home address, so somehow I have to verify that. Could people try to fake that? Yeah, it'd be some work, but they'd have to do, yeah. So that's probably the route. That is the route that conference went, was asking for evidence of where they were at. All right, so last chapter. So iPhone. How many people are iPhone users in here? My goodness. Who's not an iPhone user? Let me ask it that way. That's me and Alex.
Yeah.
Wow. And Alex online. So Karen, your iPhone. Joshua, your iPhone. Wow, just two. That's
Alex, whenever you're ready.
that's a low percent. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So
Nice brand, so.
I'm gonna say it was you.
Right.
Yeah.
Merge with T-Mobile.
Yeah, they just merged.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I was gonna say the phone call.
do you guys remember this at all? It wasn't. What was it? 2007. You guys were probably 4 years old or something at this point. We had the iPhone release. This was a big deal when it happened. So they, you know how they're always rolling out the iPhone 10 and the different ones. Well, within too short a time frame, they dropped the price. So 2 months after the announcement, and so they were trying to get more out the door, but they started thinking Steve Jobs was evil, and they're like, well, I'm not that dumb, you know, they were mad. So they ended up giving $200 rebates back to people who had purchased them. So how did that price discrimination scheme work? It didn't, right? So the whole purpose of dropping them was we sold to the high demand customers, the high valued Apple, love them. I love Apple, I'll always buy an Apple. That's not me, by the way, right? But so when the new model comes out, that's who buys that phone, right? Same thing when new fashion comes out, people who want to be in style with the latest fashion, they're the ones hitting the store when it comes out. Other people, I'll wait 6 months till it goes on sale, right? So through the timing of pricing, they can indirectly price discriminate with high value customers and low value customers. So you'll see the author using kind of that language, high value, low value customers. All right, so that one didn't work. They ended up giving out the $200 rebates. So how many of you have had an inkjet printer at some point in your life? Love the inkjet. How do you feel about those inkjet cartridges? Ridiculously expensive, right? So you're all excited, you get the printer, you print off 3 sheets of paper and the low ink warning comes on, and then you run to the store and find out that the multi-pack of ink is the same price as the stupid printer was, right? Sound about right? So that was not by accident.
What else is like this?
What's that?
You know what else is like
What's
this?
that?
Like razors.
Razors.
Like you buy like the blade and like, or like the razor itself and like 4 blades for like $20. And then
Right.
you buy like 5 blades and it's like $60 or
Yeah.
$40,
Yep.
whatever it is.
Yep, that's another one. So look at that though, ink cartridge versus the actual printers themselves. So yes, you mentioned razors. How would movies be like that and popcorn?
The movie itself is like $6, and your popcorn is like $13.
Yeah. $13 for popcorn, $6 for the movie, right? So lots of things when we start thinking about this, lots of ways that companies might be able to nudge. So back to what we talked about at the beginning of today, substitute products or complementary products? Complementary products, they go together. Does the same company own them or different companies? Same, right? So if you own 2 complementary products, maybe we can push people into the higher margin product. So we sell the printers cheap, and then they come in and we're pushing people into our other product. Here it's real obvious because it's like the inkjet printer doesn't work without the ink cartridges. But we can also do that in more subtle ways where products go together. So it's the same concept. Okay, questions or comments more on that? So what could spoil this for HP?
Another company.
Another company doing what?
Makes a cartridge.
Makes a cartridge compatible, right? So does that exist? Yes, right? So you get some generic brands or something else, and I remember the little, trying to do a syringe. Did you see the refillable ones? Remember seeing those on TV? I don't know if those are still out there or not, but you can actually refill the ink cartridge when it got low. So different types of innovations. So if HP has the prices too high, it might induce some creative people to come up with ways that it creates substitutes. So then what does HP do to offset that? If somebody comes up with the clever engineering and they're kind of able to make something work that comes up with an ink cartridge?
Patent protection.
Okay, so there could be patent stuff. Yeah.
Or they change the next printers so that the cards won't hurt.
The cartridge is a little bit different, right? So, oh, this is stupid. Well, I just had this other printer. Now I bought a new printer because I wanted one that was a little faster, and it takes a different ink cartridge than the ones I had left over that I had bought before, right?
Like iPhone with chargers.
Yeah, chargers, other things. So they keep kind of innovating little differences that us as consumers, sometimes we step back and say, well, I didn't do that. That was dumb. But there's a reason to it, right? So they might be able to keep competitors away by doing some variations or changes. And just as a copycat is starting to figure it out, they've kind of moved on to some other different variants on it. Okay, so this is sometimes a little hard to get used to, but we're going to start thinking about segmenting customers here. So we got low value consumers and high value consumers. So there's the values that they place: $100 value, 1 cartridge; $200 value, 2 cartridges. So why do we call it a metering scheme? What's the metering part of that? What are we metering?
Because like parking meters, people don't have the paying for maintenance, like the highest value goes to it.
Okay.
Whoever has the highest
You
value.
have to put quarters in.
You got to keep putting the quarters in, right? Yeah. So the high value customers will keep pumping the quarters in because they'll get more out of it. So that's the metering part here, is the high value customers are going to do it. So we then can look at the revenue for each one. Notice in each case, we're selling the same printer. So we've got the $100, we got strategy one $50 printer, $50 cartridge, or $0 printer, $100 cartridge. And by getting the high value customer to pay that, we're going to increase revenues. And we still maintain the low value customer is the main thing. Right? So we're keeping the low value customer, but we're squeezing a little bit more money out of the high value customer. So we're charging different prices to different people. We're kind of being a little creative, a little bit sneaky about it, by being able to separate out, like in this case, the cartridges and the product. Okay, questions or comments there? Okay, so let me comment. We kind of talked about the other stuff here, but this tying arrangement. You can come to Ottawa University, but you have to live in the dorm. Is that a tying arrangement? Is that more profitable for OU to tie housing to the tuition? I mean, would you have to live in campus housing to get an education at OU? No, other people do it, right? So some cases we have tying arrangements that are legal, but in other cases they can be illegal. So you can't, so in the real estate business, kind of the classic tying arrangement was, I'll sell your house at a discounted rate of 5% commission, but then I get to list your vacation property too. So if you tie the sale of those two properties together, so you're giving a preferential price, but you're tying it to another sale that they have to do to get it, that's illegal. That type of tying arrangement. So you have to be careful. Sometimes it's allowed, sometimes it's not. I think in the case of university housing, they make the plea that it's part of the experience of being a freshman or whatever, of the college experience, that you should live on campus. Also, what can play a role is that there's other colleges the student could go to and not have to pay for housing. Right? So they could go to KU, go to the state school, and they don't have any requirement that you have to live on campus. So while Ottawa University could have to have that policy, if the consumer has options of other ways to go where they don't have to do that, then the tying arrangement might be legal. So it's kind of situational with tying. All right, any questions or comments there? All right, more software here. Okay, so Minitab is a statistical software, kind of like Stata, that you can use. So which did they have to spend money to do, to make it weaker or stronger? To make it weak? Think about it, right? You came up with a product, and it does all the bells and whistles, but in order to make money, I'm going to offer a weaker version of it. I'm going to actually tie its hands. I'm going to develop some code that doesn't allow it to work to its optimal level. Right? So totally legal, but they're actually changing their product and weakening it, hopefully able to pick up from these pictures we have here, of being able to pick up the non-students, right? Students versus non-students. So if I had to sell to one market, then the students wouldn't buy it at all. But if I can change it enough and weaken it for maybe the use that students would be using, then I'm not going to alienate my other users. And I'm still going to be able to sell to both in both markets. Okay, comments or questions there? Any other software programs that you've seen this? Does that ring a bell? Office.
Or Microsoft Suite or 360.
Yeah, the 360 suite versus other things, so different ways that they package that stuff together.
Stata does it.
Stata does it. A lot of them do it, actually. They start, so Adobe, their whole suite of things that you can do. Whether you can make a Word into a PDF and print to a PDF, You can't do that with the Adobe Reader, so they bait you into it with having the free Adobe Reader, but then you learn about your friend who can print to a PDF, like, oh, how do you do that? Well, you have to pay the subscription fee now. I found out they're not supporting my Acrobat Pro. When I first started at OU in 2011, I bought the Adobe Acrobat Pro, which allowed all that functionality. Well, they quit on that. The business model kind of moved to that subscription service like you guys are pretty much used to now, rather than buying a single piece of software that would then do that functionality. I think I paid $89 for it back in 2011, 2012. Okay. How do we make money? So who's our user that's willing to pay more? Commercial users, right? So business users, kind of like similar to our business airlines, people who are flying, they're willing to pay a little bit more. So for the full featured version, home users are willing to pay more, but not much more, right? So they don't have, you're going to lose your customers if you go too high. So that's a fairly elastic demand curve, fairly flat. You don't have a lot of wiggle room on the price. If we're thinking about the demand curve, it's fairly flat. You raise your price too much and you're going to lose everybody. They're going to be very responsive to that. Whereas the commercial users are less so. So you're going to see some homework problems like this. Should I sell only to the commercial people? In other words, charge a high price. If I charge $500, I'm not going to sell any units to the home users, right? So if I do that, I make $500. Sell to all users at a low price. So I do the full featured version at $175. Of course, these guys are going to buy it, and these guys are going to buy it. So I make $175 each. So sometimes you'll see a homework problem that says, assume there are equal numbers of buyers in both markets. So like there's 50 of these, or 50 of these, or 100 of these, or 100 of these. At the end of the day, then you can just kind of normalize that to selling one unit. And the analysis will be the same. As long as there's, and usually most of the problems have kind of equal people in each pool. So I'll make $350. What would I want to do between these two options? Sell between 1 and 2. Go with the high price or drop the price and sell to both people and make everybody happy. Just sell to the high, right? Keep the price high and I'm going to make more money. So under some circumstances, you might just want to keep the price high. Yes, if I drop the price, I'm going to sell more product, but we talked about the pitfalls of that. That doesn't mean you're going to make money. We want to maximize profit, not revenue or something else. So here we are mostly focusing on the revenue. Okay, so then price discriminate. We have a disabled version at 150. How many disabled versions are people going to buy? We've got one to the home user. Are commercial users going to want to buy that? So let's think about the full featured version first here. So full featured version at $449. So which one are they going to buy? The full featured. Why?
Less than what they're willing to pay for.
Okay, so now we can start thinking in terms of consumer surplus, right? How much more value too that they're having versus the price about what they're willing to pay and what they actually pay. So they set $449 on which one's getting a better deal. So with $449, what's their consumer surplus? $51. What is it with the disabled version? If it's at 150, they're willing to pay 200. So that's something that you kind of have to work through a few problems here. It's not always easy to see, but remember the consumer surplus problem. So here, what they're saying is that if we price it here, they're going to pick the full version, because what we're trying to do is sell the disabled version to the home users, not to the high value customers. I want to sell them the full featured version. In order to do that, I'd have to do $449 or less, of course. And even if it was less, we got a lot of wiggle room here, $99. If this was at $400, we'd still be ahead of the game, right? It'd be 150 plus 400 gives me 550, which is more than either one of these two. Okay, questions or comments there? Get the flavor for it. Oh yeah, the printer. Laser printer. I gave up on the inkjets a long time. Buy a laser printer, by the way. I've still got all of the lousy inkjets. They're cheap. Get the Brother laser printer. So nice. Okay, so we've got kind of two things going on here. The damaged goods, so again, we're weakening the product. We're making it less efficient just to kind of sell more. And here, competition with airlines. So one of the best things that happened for consumers, since I brought up Southwest before, I'll bring it up again, was Southwest Airlines. They really helped keep airline prices down, and the growth of what they've done over time has been good. So when people are having a price discrimination scheme that can be copied, which is kind of like reselling it in a sense, right? Then we might ruin the good thing you got going in terms of profits. Okay, so this one draws back to a regular old demand curve. In order to sell more, we need to drop the price. We don't always buy multiple of some goods, right? Once you have one car, you don't buy a second, 1997 Malibu for another one if you have it. So, but with other commodity goods, if you are using the product a lot, then this would be true for individuals. So the reason I highlight that is that what we've kind of been talking about before was that over the quantities, you have potentially a single consumer lined up. And the high value people are here and the low value people are here. So kind of in our student example, when I lined up the market demand curve, remember this section of the demand curve was all the non-students, right? So the high value people were stacked to the left. They had a higher willingness to pay. And then as I dropped the price, the non-students entered the market. So we've really got people organized by their willingness to pay, with high value customers to the left, low value customers to the right. With this, it's a little bit different, because we're thinking about individual customers' demand, that they might buy another unit of the good themselves, going from 1 unit to 2 units to 3 units as the price goes down. So that's where this volume discount is a little different than what we were doing over here. Okay, so how can we come up with some pricing schemes to take advantage of this concept? What sort of volume discounts do we have out in the real world?
Could this be like a buy one, get one half off kind of thing?
Yes, absolutely. Buy one, get one, or buy one, get the second one half off, or whatever. Yeah, all those schemes are playing into this. And so now we can start playing on people's emotions sometimes. So let's just say that I think especially in the clothing, we see the Kohl's seems to be the master of this, right? So let's say your actual demand curve looks like this. We got $20, and then we've got oh, I don't know, second shirt, $10. So this is the quantity of shirts or something. So this is 1 unit, this is 2 units. So buy one, get the second one at half off is capturing this person, right? So hopefully our shirts will be lower than that cost, and that will induce them to go. So if, depending on the person, we might be able to shift this around by, this is more of the behavioral part. I raise my price on the first one to 25, and then I do the offer. So buy one, get the second one off at half, so I'm not really doing as sweet of a deal as what I was there, right? So we can play, well, what I'm trying to do is increase my sales. If I can induce a few more people to come at $12.50, then I just sold $37.50 worth of product is the total sale, right? And so if you find that people respond to that type of thing, like that's what Kohl's does, right, and some other places, they might just artificially raise the price of the first so that you look like kind of, you're almost dumb if you don't buy the second one, right? Or you feel bad if you don't buy the second one. Oh, I have to get the second one. Since it's so cheap, it's half off for the second. The company's just trying to induce you into doing it. At the same time, then, the high value customer that really only wants one and doesn't do the deal, they don't care and they buy the shirt for 25. Whereas you would have had it for 20. And so we kind of pushed that person into giving us more money than what we might have done under a different scheme as well. All right. Okay, so can we get the people going? How many of you have seen at the grocery store that they tell you 1 for $1 or 2 for $1.50, something like that? And have you gone to the cash register with only 1 and they still give you the discounted price? Yeah. So they're bluffing you on some of that stuff. So be aware of that in some cases. You might have to test them. I busted that one early on grocery stores. Other companies will, you do have to buy the second one to get the deal. But sometimes they'll bluff you into just doing it because they don't want to deal with you at the cash register or whatever. So they'll just, you know, most people will say, oh, for 50 cents for 2, I'll grab 2, and you put it in there. And it just, again, it nudges people into doing the 2, even though they're not going to really carry through with it at the end. Oops, wanted this here. All right, we're getting close to being done for tonight. Okay, so volume discounts, like we've been talking about, we can keep kind of dropping the price as we buy more. And then we have kind of the golf course model or the Costco model. So two-part pricing. So we get a membership fee, and then we drop the price low. Okay, so this part's probably the more confusing part here. So the consumer's total value for 6 units is 7 plus 6 plus 5 plus 4. Where's that coming from? Willingness to pay for each one, right? So yeah, just marching down the demand curve. So it really represents their consumer surplus. So remember, consumer surplus is the difference between what you're willing to pay and what you actually pay for each unit you consume. So in the simple one I have here, if the market price is 10, the first unit you were willing to pay 20, so we have that consumer surplus, right? So we've got that area representing consumer surplus. That's all we're identifying here, is that if we do 6 units, that is the value to the consumer with 6. So then, with this two-part pricing model, maybe I can extract some of that consumer surplus by bargaining with them over it on the 6 units. And so this then induces people to kind of change their valuation on it. So with the golf course model, I don't know how they've been pretty successful. I was skeptical about it when they opened, but Great Life here in town. And so they charge now $50 for unlimited golf. So how do they make money? Why would people be like totally using the course, overusing the course? I kind of thought the course would wear out from overuse because the cost was 0, right? Unlimited golf. But have you golfed there at Great Life? What do you have to do to get free golf? Walk. No cart. So guess what a cart runs? Yeah, maybe even 9, like for a 9-hole course, $1 a hole, which isn't too far off what I've seen other courses charge for a per-use fee. So again, it was kind of a clever way that most people don't want to walk the course. I like to go on courses being cheap and wanting to get a little bit of exercise. I'll go and walk the course. So I'm busting their little scheme, but it's been pretty successful because you pay that fee, and then you go golf, and people use the cart anyway, and the cart price just ends up being about what you pay for a round of golf anyway. Brilliant, right? A little out of it, not too bad, but I was certainly thinking that they might run into problems. Okay, bundling, that's probably good, that's fine. Okay, last example, and we'll call it a night here. I love this one because it's about me. So bundling. So why does this work?
Because we can capture like a range of your preferences, because at the last point, they make the point that they don't know what your preferences are. So they might be charging you at 55 a little bit more for one of them that you're willing to pay for the out.
And they don't know me, right? So some people have to have their cable, right? I didn't. I wasn't using cable, so all I wanted was internet, right? So you got some people that want the internet that value it. Other people have to have their cable, and they're going to use their phone for internet or something, right? So we don't know. They don't know. But once they bring the line, what's the marginal cost? If you buy cable, what's the marginal cost of them adding internet? What's the marginal cost to the company of adding internet if you've already ran cable? Nothing. You know, like nothing. Like flip a switch, right? Or like, oh, click a button. Yes, yes, right? Because all the infrastructure's there. So it's basically cost-free for them to bring these added other things. But what's kind of neat about this then is that if the marginal cost is constant, like if they set up one of the things at 30, we tend to have the perception it'd be 90, but it's really not, because the marginal cost of the additional service is nothing. Any one of them individually would actually be 30. Like if you just wanted internet, it'd be 30. If you just wanted cable, it'd be 30. But to bundle cable and internet together, the marginal cost of the other one that you didn't want is 0. So that circumstance then allows the cable company to maybe get more dollars out of the consumer than what they would have otherwise spent. So if I value internet at 5, so we're at 45 and 15 for cable, I'm able to or willing to pay that bundle price where I wouldn't have bought it otherwise. And it's more profitable for the company. They're making $15 more off me than what I would have paid for it. Okay. I think that's a good spot to end. That is the end.